it can all change so quickly. In her late 30s, author and theologian Sarah Bessey was driving on a bright, clear day when she was hit by a careless driver and seriously injured in the crash. She suffered a concussion, damage to her spine, ribs, hip, and foot. She describes the misalignment of her skeleton as sending blazing hot rays of pain radiating throughout her entire body. This pain went on for months. Some days dull and manageable, but many days not. Often, the sharp stabbing pain left her unable to walk, and her husband would help carry her back to bed. Accustomed to being strong and competent, a good mom to her 4 kids, a sought-after public speaker, a brilliant writer, Sarah kept pushing forward. She worked and struggled and cried and prayed for a miracle. And then, one day, she received one. Through a chance encounter at an unlikely gathering, she met Harold and Theo, who asked if they could pray for her, not knowing the extent of her pain or her injuries. She consented, and as they prayed, Sarah had the sensation of cool water flowing up her spine. And then her pain was gone. Subsequent visits to doctors confirmed that yes, her spine was now in perfect alignment. They couldn't offer any explanation for how this might be possible. In the months that followed, Sarah tried so hard to cling to the miracle. She wanted to be worthy of it, to have faith enough to trust that it was real and enduring, to lean into that glimpse of freedom. But the truth was that she was still crashing from extreme exhaustion. She was still suffering chronic pain, which, although no longer coming from her spine, meant that doctors couldn't track down why she ached all over. Eventually, she was diagnosed with post-traumatic anxiety and depression and fibromyalgia. Her central nervous system, doctors told her, had been majorly disrupted and might never fully recover. They prescribed medications for symptom management. It was the best they could do. But she couldn't bring herself to take the pills. Sarah wanted a path to return to her old self, her real self, her life before the accident. I couldn't reconcile my vision of myself, she says, with those orange child-proof bottles. The Hebrew people had been wandering through the desert for 40 years. That's what this time after the Exodus is often called, the desert wanderings. But I wonder if that's not too mild, if it conjures up images of t-shirts and bumper stickers declaring that not all who wander are lost. The Israelites weren't lost, of course, not in the literal sense. They had God and Moses guiding them through the wilderness. But spiritually, mentally, these folks were a wreck. They'd fled the slavery of Egypt with the clothes on their back and unleavened bread in their hands. The army had pursued them, and the Hebrew people had escaped remarkably over dry land through the Red Sea. Freedom, after hundreds of years of enslavement, was nothing short of miraculous. This story of salvation is so foundational that it is remembered and celebrated every year by the Jewish people, and it informs the Christian understanding of the Last Supper and the death and resurrection of Jesus. But the people Moses is talking to in our reading from Deuteronomy today don't feel like they're living inside of a miracle. They don't feel free. They are tired, hot, worn down, verging on hopelessness and despair. They've been promised a new life, one of abundant flourishing, but they can't actually see it yet. The wilderness has begun to feel like shackles in different form. And even when they do enter in the promised land soon, it won't be with their beloved leader Moses. So it won't really be how they envisioned or what they longed for. They wonder again, as they have wondered before and as they will wonder again, if this liberation is real. If the God they thought they were following is really any kind of God at all. And it is here, in this broken down, messy middle, between miracle and fulfillment of the promise, that Moses brings them this word from God. Today I have set before you life and death. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live. It was these same words that Sarah Bessie heard early one morning as she sat in the crisp, cool air, her attention drawn to clouds and a gliding heron. Before her accident, Sarah had walked in the mornings, but now she had taken to driving to a nearby park, sitting on a bench and watching the sun come up over their neighborhood pond. In the stillness, she says that this passage landed as a life preserver to someone drowning. She heard the familiar story, knowing that it was a commandment of God to the Hebrew people, but receiving it as an invitation spoken into her own life. As much as you are able, choose life. It opened up possibility, space between the miraculous healing that had indeed happened and the ongoing pain, the hope for new life that stretched out ahead. Sarah reflects, the words that rose up in my soul that morning, choose life, whispered that I may not have chosen this particular path, but I could, while walking it, choose to move toward life. I could choose to open myself to the possibilities of joy in it. I could choose to love and become reacquainted with my new body. I could envision life as I believe God envisioned it. Unashamed, just, merciful, loving, life-giving, beautiful, nourishing, and peaceful, and move in that direction still. Sarah returned home, went to the kitchen, took down those orange child-proof bottles, and putting the medication on her tongue, blessed it and swallowed. The miracle now, she said, would be in the agency of life, of rising and moving every day toward life instead of death. I could take the path of avoidance and numbing, of bitterness and hiding, of wallowing and anger, of stubbornness and resistance, or I could limp, sometimes literally, toward life. My sense is that these words often get distorted, as if we simply tried hard enough, we could choose our best life now. But the truth of our journey through the wilderness is that we have to choose life again, every day, sometimes a moment at a time. We might get there limping, but it is a miracle every time we choose to show up for therapy, or take our meds, or go to a 12-step meeting, or ask a friend for help, or reach for reconciliation. This is some of what Jesus is trying to get at, I think. Today's gospel passage has sometimes been framed as impossibly high standards for people of faith, a yardstick by which we all fail. But this Jesus just proclaimed blessings on those who are suffering, on the poor, the meek, and those in mourning. This same Jesus extends forgiveness and healing freely and lavishly. I don't believe that this same Jesus is really set on condemning us all for our thoughts and our broken relationships. If these words have been used against you, barring you from the table or from Christian community, in the name of the church, I am sorry. You are welcome, and you are loved. The Jesus of the Gospels is pointing back to the ways of life and death that are set before us. Where possible, choose forgiveness. Acknowledge what you can't do on your own, accept help. Seek abundance and flourishing in everyday actions. Jesus is pushing us toward the miraculous. He's asking us to move in the direction of the just, merciful, beautiful, nourishing life God envisions. Even when we find ourselves wandering unsure in the wilderness, even before we can see the relief of the promised land, we can make this choice again, a tiny step at a time. Choose to move toward love. Choose joy and mercy. As much as you are able, choose life.